Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. President-elect Joe Biden, on the occasion of unveiling a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package number 3.0, he had some comment about school reopening, Amy.
Yeah, he did. And is this every Democratic politician repeats the same stuff? I couldn't believe these words came out of his mouth.
We'll also do everything we can to keep our educators and students safe, to safely reopen a majority of our K through 8 schools by the end of the first 100 days. We can do this if we give the school districts, the schools themselves, the communities, the states.
The reason why my hair's on fire again, what about 9 through 12? What about high schoolers? Does anybody in this country care about them? Are they okay to be on their own? We're just going to take away their lives? And no one's saying anything? It just bothers me.
Well, I think maybe the San Francisco Teachers Union has the answer. The United Educators of San Francisco, an august body, I have no doubt, are demanding I'm quoting, the installation of lids on every toilet, which is not required or recommended by county, state, or federal health officials. What? We need lids on toilets. Forget HEPA filters. Well, no, forget. In addition to HEPA filters, completely new HVAC systems. A Green New Deal, increasing marginal tax rates on the rich. What are the other demands for teachers to go back to school? Now it's toilet lids. Okay. Toilet lids, and it's funny. John Miltimore has a good piece on this over at fee.org. He does recall there were stories when people are trying to figure out how this transmits, and the media was doing a wonderful job helping politicians to foment hysteria. Suggestions about flushing toilets, could that create and so on and so forth. There's a New York Times story about it and so forth. There's just one problem with the call by the San Francisco Teachers Union. The problem is that there has not been, now we're almost a year into this, there has not been a single case worldwide that has been linked to any aerosol residue from flushing a toilet. Not a single case worldwide. It's if I were a little bit more cynical, I would think it's almost like they don't want to go back to work. They just want to get paid not to work. But that's the cynic in me. Let's talk to an optimist about this. Maybe he can clear up this toilet matter. Perhaps he had to deal with it with the Chicago Teachers Union. Nothing is beyond the pale these days, is it? Pleased to be joined again by Paul Vallas, the former superintendent of Chicago Public Schools, Philadelphia, New Orleans, former mayoral candidate as well. You know him. Paul, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me this morning. The toilet thing, boy, that's just beautiful.
Yeah, you think that could be the inflection point for us to get kids back in schools if we just give the teachers the toilet lids they want?
Maybe that'll be the catalyst. Let me point out that this bill also, as you know, the Chicago Public Schools have already received about $1 billion in COVID relief in both the first bill and the second bill. Of course, about 100 million of that had to go to parochial and private schools. But under the Biden bill, they're going to receive, they could potentially receive another $1.6 billion. Now, when you take the private school allocation out, it's about $1.4 billion for a school district that is just now opening and is not opening for high school kids.
Well, what did you think about what Biden said yesterday? I mean, the next 100 days for K through 8, but again, not even including high schoolers. Why are they being ignored on a state and now a national level?
Well, I think clearly the teachers' union is going to dominate the administration. It played a big role in the election of Biden, and obviously the selection of the new Secretary of Education was heavily influenced by the union, and I just think it's going to be a union agenda. Plus, if you remember, the platform, the education platform of the Democratic Party was written by the unions, the charter school parents and charter school representatives. Incidentally, charter schools are not-for-profit public schools. So let me just put that on the record. But they were denied any participation. And if you read the Democratic agenda, and if you read the NEA, their proclamation or their manifesto for public education, it really is designed to almost wipe out the remaining public school educational choices that are available to poor parents. And that's why I posted that piece about really the perpetuation of institutional racism in Chicago is really the Chicago Teachers Union, with their stranglehold over the Chicago public schools.
And speaking of Chicago Teachers Union, this whole issue of teachers not willing to go back, and Janice Jackson, the superintendent, saying, well, you're not going to get paid if you don't go back, and then the teachers union filing labor grievances on behalf of those who aren't getting paid for not going back. And the discussions generically about we're going to pursue the progressive discipline as codified in the union contract. I mean, what is realistic here in terms of what a mayor and a school superintendent and a school board should be doing in terms of getting teachers back to school or else? I mean, what is their stick if the carrot doesn't work?
Look, the union has no leverage. What I would have done is I would have reopened schools in September with the proper safeguards. I would have even deviated from these bizarre hybrid models, which in some cases don't provide the kids with a better educational service. But the school district is under no obligation to pay teachers, no federal mandates, no state mandates to pay teachers who do not show up for work. And the union really, if they strike, they violate their contract. And I'm sure the union would love to have the $1.5 billion contract that they have that will make them the highest paid teachers and highest paid employees among big city school districts in the nation. I'm sure they'd love to have that contract voided. The problem here is, just as they put a very controversial so-called public safety bill on the governor's desk, the police reform bill, which is more a criminals protection bill than it is a bill that's going to help the victims. There's a second bill on the desk stripping the statutes of all those provisions that they enacted in 1995, which would allow the teachers union to strike on just about anything: school closures, class size reduction, staffing models, etc. And of course, we'll see if Governor Pritzker signs it. He probably will sign it. So when that legislation passes, the district is really going to have very few options. They're going to have to succumb to the dictates of the union, because it literally allows them to strike for just about anything.
Now, in New York, that's the epicenter, death capital of the United States. What is the positivity rate for the schools? Not the city of New York, but inside the schools. What's the positivity rate?
Well, I've seen two rates. First of all, I saw an article just the other day. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, when they talked about the reopening of schools in Miami-Dade. Those schools have been open since September. Many districts have reopened. In New York, they reopened in September. When the city positivity rate rose, they closed schools, and the mayor, de Blasio, got so much heat, he quickly reopened them. And the positivity rate, while in the city was at last, from what I last read, 9%, the positivity rate in the schools, depending on which articles you read, are anywhere from 0.2% to 0.7%. So by all definition, the absolute safest place to be if you're in New York is in the New York public schools.
But it seems that, and we've talked to Carol Markowitz at the New York Post. She's basically said, with respect to the spring, she's sort of conceded that they're not going to be back in school in any meaningful way this spring. I'm hoping for the fall. Is that what parents in Chicago and Illinois should be hoping for, is something approximating a resumption of the normal school day by the fall?
Yeah, I think so. I think the best you can hope for is that the school day will be restored, hopefully, in the fall. I certainly think there's going to be. I mean, even the Chicago Public School plan does not open high schools. There's no date for opening high schools. And let me point out that in Chicago alone, and I read an article just the other day that was, I think there was a shooting, Bridgeport carjacking, 15-year-old. There was another carjacking by another 15-year-old, one in Bridgeport. The other one, I think it was in Lincoln Park.
Yes.
And the police have told me that a minimum 25%, and probably far greater, of the carjackings have been done by teenagers.
Yep.
The firefighter who was shot in Beverly, retired firefighter, was shot by a teenager. But there have been 83 school-age children in Chicago murdered this year and 567 shot, because every day 100,000 high school kids are either at home, most probably alone, or they're walking the dangerous streets of Chicago. That reason alone would be a reason to get these kids back in school.
All they have to do is turn on the camera, and then they could leave for the whole day, and the teachers not know, then come back at 3 o'clock and click off, and that's considered present. It's not absent.
Yeah,
they know how to work the system. Trust me. And if you're not there watching them, they'll do whatever they want to do.
And Amy, I'm not suggesting that there aren't teachers that are dissenting. I'm not suggesting that the majority of teachers aren't working really, really hard. As you know, I think you met a couple from Hawaii who were mailing it in, and of course we have the much celebrated case of the union official in Florida sending us wonderful pictures of her pool party.
Yeah, Sarah Chambers. Whatever happened to her?
Yeah. Well, obviously the media didn't spend a lot of time because that is contrary to the narrative. But you have to understand, real damage is being done to children, social, emotionally, academically. All the pediatricians and the child experts tell you the damage that is done, particularly for the youngest kids. They shouldn't be on a computer or for more than an hour. Real damage is being done during a period of accelerated brain development, and that damage is permanent. That is not temporary damage. That is permanent damage. And then, of course, on the back end with the high school kids. I mean, how many borderline high school children in Chicago, and high school kids are being hurt all over the country in affluent districts where the high schools, obviously are the center of so many students' world, or for that matter, even in the city of Chicago. But these poor kids walking the street, on the street, the gangs aren't taking a holiday. The gangs aren't conforming to Governor Pritzker's,
stay-at-home
COVID, protections. I mean, they're open for business, and they're recruiting these kids, and these kids are getting shot, and they're participating in the carjackings. It's just a dangerous situation. But the union doesn't care. Period.
And the other thing they're doing is taking advantage of just the focus on reopening schools, or such understandable emphasis on that, and not on what the curriculum is going to be when the schools do reopen. And I'm speaking to things like the culturally responsive teaching and learning standards rule that the Illinois State Board of Education has proposed, that would further politicize the classrooms and focus on trying to raise these kids to be, or teach these kids to be political activists rather than well-rounded students who are going to go on to college and beyond.
Well, Dan, you can rest assured that accountability is out the window. That the type of aggressive accountability that 3 prior presidential administrations have been pushing is now going to be set aside. I mean, look, the teachers union, even when they forced the district to go full remote, didn't want a full day of remote instruction. They wanted to limit it to 3 hours. And then, of course, they didn't want their remote instruction to be observed. And so it's a disaster.
He is Paul Vallas, former superintendent of Chicago Public Schools, former mayoral candidate. Paul, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Have a great morning.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank
for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Washington, D.C. to be an armed camp for the Biden inauguration. Airbnb chief says travel will never be normal again. Those stories next. You've all probably heard of asbestos and know that it's dangerous. Most mesothelioma diagnoses are thought to be related to asbestos exposure. People who were exposed to asbestos decades ago are being diagnosed to this day with mesothelioma. That's because it can take as many as 30 or even 50 years to develop. But did you also know there is money to pay victims of asbestos exposure from years ago? An estimated $30 billion is available to help compensate victims and their families. If you or a member of your family have been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be able to receive some of this money without ever going to court or filing a lawsuit. Get a free legal review today. Call Sokolov Law